Think about how you charge your smartphone. You plug it in before bed, you go to sleep, and you wake up to a full battery.
Right, it's a completely thoughtless process. Invisible, really.
Exactly. It is totally thoughtless. Now, imagine if your phone required you to, drive across town to a specific pole.
Oh, and download a totally new software update just to use it.
Yes, and swipe some proprietary membership card and then stand in the freezing rain for 40 minutes just to get enough juice to text your mom.
I mean, people would simply stop using smartphones.
You would never put up with it.
No,
Yeah,
because
good man.
convenience dictates adoption, right?
Yeah.
We have an incredibly low tolerance for daily logistical hurdles.
But for the last few years, that is essentially the baseline experience we've been asking everyday people to accept when they make the switch to an electric vehicle.
It really is.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we have an absolute mountain of sources from 2026 that totally flip the script on what the public thinks is happening with the EV transition.
Yeah, the landscape we are looking at today is completely different from the headlines you see.
We're looking at a brand new S&P Global Survey on Consumer Readiness, a really fascinating Nature publication mapping out national charging gaps, plus Q1 2026 market data from Veloz and Electrac.
And we also have some highly revealing industry roadmaps from Uber and To7 Motors.
Right. And just to set the mission for you, the listener, right up front, the goal of this deep dive isn't to debate whether you personally should go out and buy an EV this afternoon.
Exactly. There is a very polarized narrative out there right now, mostly focused on extremes, like either the EV revolution is completely dead or it's absolutely flawless.
And neither is true. Instead, we are looking at the messy, fascinating reality of the EV transition in 2026.
The data paints a picture of a massive structural evolution taking place just beneath the surface.
Yeah, so we're exploring why brand new sales are appearing to stall, why the physical infrastructure is actually getting much better, how the used market is experiencing a total gold rush, and what next-gen battery tech means for your future garage.
There is a lot to cover.
Okay, let's unpack this. To really grasp the state of the market right now, we have to start inside the mind of the consumer.
Right. And the 2025 S&P Global Survey offers a perfect window into that mindset. They polled nearly 8,000 respondents across 8 countries to measure sentiment.
And the hesitation they found is just palpable.
It really is. A full 28% of people stated flat out that they wouldn't even consider an EV for their next vehicle purchase.
Over a quarter of people. And the underlying reason for that hesitation has fundamentally shifted, hasn't it?
What's fascinating here is that for a decade, all we heard about was range anxiety.
Right, people terrified they'd run out of battery in the middle of a desert highway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the S&P data indicates that fear has morphed into something else entirely. It's now charging anxiety. 65% of respondents cite the charging infrastructure as insufficient.
And here is the stat that really jumped out at me from that report. 47% of current EV owners report having significant problems using public chargers.
Nearly half.
Half. That is nearly half of the people who already spent their money, who bought into the tech, saying the daily experience is just a headache.
Because the EV revolution right now is less about the chemistry inside the battery and much more a test of administrative competence.
That's a good way to put it.
I mean, gas pumps do not require you to create an account or download a specific app or worry about software handshakes between the car and the dispenser.
Yeah, imagine pulling up to a gas station, but the pump requires a software update before you can get fuel. The mass market won't tolerate that.
And when consumers face that kind of daily hassle, they pause. And when the consumer pauses, capital follows that hesitation.
Which is why we've watched global automakers write down over $70 billion, right?
Yes, $70 billion. They're scaling back their EV plans and pivoting heavily to hybrids as a sort of behavioral stopgap.
A behavioral stopgap. I love that framing. People want the environmental and fuel-saving benefits, but they refuse to change their daily fueling habits.
Exactly. And if you dig into the home charging versus public charging divide in this survey, it reveals a deepening social issue.
Because 46% of people currently charge at home.
Right, mostly overnight. But 74% of the overall respondents lack a home charger entirely.
Wait, so almost 3/4 of people don't even have the option to charge at home.
Correct. And having a driveway totally changes the ownership calculus. If you can plug in at home, an EV is incredibly cheap and overwhelmingly convenient.
Because you leave every morning with a full tank.
Precisely. But if you are a renter or you live in a dense urban apartment building, owning an EV becomes this weekly logistical puzzle.
Yeah, you become entirely dependent on fighting for street chargers or claiming a spot at your workplace. Is this just an engineering problem, or are we accidentally creating a social divide here?
It's definitely creating a divide. The current infrastructure heavily favors the homeowner. And the S&P analysts point out that once a consumer forms the impression that a technology isn't mainstream ready, reversing that impression is astronomically expensive.
Because people remember the time they were stranded with a broken charging screen.
Long after the station has actually been fixed.
Right. Well, connecting that consumer frustration to the physical hardware brings us to what is actually happening on the ground.
Because the narrative shifts here.
Yeah, if you look at the Q1 2026 data from Electric, the physical infrastructure is actually quietly undergoing a massive upgrade.
It really is. Electric's data shows the reliability of public chargers has jumped significantly. They are hitting the 90 to 95% uptime range in most states now.
95%, that feels like a direct response to all those viral videos of dead cable.
It is. Plus, the power levels are rising rapidly. 67% of all new ports installed in the first quarter are 250 kilowatts or higher.
So fast charging is just the baseline now, not a premium feature.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And despite this massive influx of faster hardware, pricing is surprisingly stable at around 53 cents per kilowatt hour.
We're also seeing a major shift in who actually owns these stations. Tesla used to be the undisputed king, right? But in Q1, they only accounted for 26% of new ports.
Right. Smaller networks are gobbling up market share.
But to understand why this build-out hasn't happened even faster, we have to talk about the grid. The S&P report uses an analogy that blew my mind.
The supermarket one.
Yes, a high-power fast charger draws electricity on the scale of a small supermarket, not a household socket.
It's staggering to think about.
So if adding a charging plaza with 8 stalls is literally like plugging 8 supermarkets into the local grid all at once, is it any wonder the grid is the real bottleneck?
The dispensing unit is the easiest part. The invisible hurdle is the underlying grid. Upgrading substations, trenching high-voltage underground cables.
And getting the massive transformers.
Right. It takes years of permitting. You are overhauling century-old utility architecture to support massive spikes in localized demand.
Which highlights the importance of the Nature publication we read. They analyzed the NEVI program, the federal initiative targeting 50-mile gaps on alternative fuel corridors.
The spatial modeling in that study is really encouraging. They calculated that if all these corridors get fast chargers, 94% of U.S. counties will reach at least 75% coverage.
So eliminating range anxiety for long road trips is actually happening.
It is achievable, though they do note some highly rural counties will still have gaps.
But the study also modeled a wild cost-saving efficiency about hardware. They found that if Tesla's network became universally accessible via their Magic Docks, it could save that NEVI program between $166 to $332 million.
Millions, just in redundant construction.
Wait, I want to make sure I understand the mechanism there. A Magic Dock isn't something the driver carries in their trunk, right?
No, a Magic Dock is an adapter integrated directly into the Tesla supercharger post itself.
Okay, so how does it work?
If a non-Tesla driver pulls up and uses the app, the station physically unlocks a universal adapter attached to the Tesla plug.
Oh, so it just lets any brand of car use the station seamlessly.
Exactly. And because Tesla already has this massive footprint in optimal highway locations, using their real estate prevents the government from having to buy land and trench new grid connections right across the street.
Saving over $300 million just by unlocking an adapter is amazing. But speaking of massive capital efficiency, we have to look at Uber's roadmap.
Yes, their new investment strategy.
They just announced a $100 million play to build 1,000 high-power fast chargers. But they aren't trying to be a utility company. They're offering utilization guarantees to existing providers.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the underlying economics of Uber's strategy are brilliant.
Because high capex charging relies on constant throughput, right?
Exactly. A fast charging plaza relies on constant use to be profitable. A charger sitting empty at 2 in the morning is bleeding money.
Right. Everyone charges at 5 p.m., and the stations are ghost towns by midnight.
So Uber is scaling up this massive robotaxi fleet with Waymo and WeRide. These are cars running 24 hours a day, needing rapid charging at all hours.
Oh, I see.
By guaranteeing that their robotaxis will use these specific stations, Uber completely de-risks the investment for providers like EVgo.
They're essentially underwriting the base revenue of the station. The charging provider knows they have guaranteed late-night revenue.
which inadvertently strengthens the network for everyday drivers during the day, too. It shifts the industry from a build-it-and-hope model to guaranteed commercial demand.
Okay, so the infrastructure is maturing, but we still have to address the elephant in the room,
The price.
the price of the cars. A perfectly reliable charger doesn't help you if a new EV still costs 60 grand. And the Velaz data shows that in California, new EV sales plummeted 37% in Q1 2026.
Which looks terrible on paper.
Yeah, if you just look at that headline, you'd assume the whole market is failing.
But the data shows the action hasn't stopped at all. It has simply shifted to the secondary market.
The used EV gold rush. Nationally, used EV sales are actually up 12%.
And the price gap between a used EV and a comparable gas car has shrunk to just $1,300.
That's nothing. The average used EV is now roughly $34,800. But here is the kicker. Nearly 44% of used EV transactions in February were under $25,000.
Breaking that $25,000 barrier is the critical tipping point. That's where it transitions from a luxury purchase to a mainstream commuter car.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. It reminds me of the smartphone market.
How so?
Well, early adopters pay the massive premium for the brand new tech, right? They fund the R&D. But mass adoption only really happens when the hand-me-downs get cheap enough for normal people to buy.
Right.
So is this slowdown in new sales just an illusion hiding the true mass market tipping point happening right now on used car lots?
I think so. And to understand why this flood of affordable used vehicles is hitting exactly right now, you have to look at the commercial leasing provisions of the IRA.
The Inflation Reduction Act from a few years ago?
Yes, between 2023 and 2025. That legislation had strict domestic sourcing rules for the tax credit on new purchases, which most foreign-made EVs didn't meet.
Oh, right.
But there was a separate provision for commercial vehicles that bypassed those rules. Leasing companies realized they counted as commercial entities.
Wow.
So they bought the cars, claimed a massive credit, and passed the savings to consumers via incredibly cheap lease deals.
Oh, so it artificially spiked the lease rates 3 years ago. And now, in 2026, all of those 3-year leases are expiring at the exact same time.
Exactly. That legislation created a massive pipeline of off-lease vehicles that are now flooding the market.
And they're flying off the lots. Veloz notes they're averaging just 42 days to sell.
Which proves consumer demand remains incredibly strong. The barrier was always the price, not the powertrain.
And with federal credits expiring, state policies are stepping in. California has that proposed $200 million program for first-time buyers on used EVs.
Plus initiatives in Maine, New York, and Illinois.
So if the used market is solving the price problem today, what solves the hardware and range limitations of tomorrow?
That brings us to the battery tech.
Right, because even a cheap used EV still uses a liquid lithium-ion battery. They degrade in the cold, they take time to charge. So let's talk about the TO7 Motors data on solid-state batteries.
This is the technological leap that is finally moving from the lab to commercial use in 2026.
So what actually is a solid-state battery?
Well, a traditional lithium-ion battery uses a liquid electrolyte to shuttle ions back and forth. That liquid is highly flammable.
Right.
A solid-state battery swaps that liquid for a non-flammable solid material, typically polymers, oxides, or sulfides.
The safety implications alone are massive. Thermal events don't start until, what, 247 degrees Celsius?
Right, instead of 90 degrees for liquid. But the performance jump is what's truly staggering.
Yeah, the TO7 data says energy density is jumping from around 2 to 300 watt-hours per kilogram up to 4 or 500.
Which translates to potential ranges of 1,000 to 1,200 kilometers on a single charge.
Over 1,000 kilometers. And charging to 80% in 10 to 15 minutes. Plus, it retains 72% capacity at negative 30 degrees Celsius.
A liquid battery at negative 30 is basically a frozen brick.
It really is like moving from clunky mechanical hard drives to blazing fast solid-state drives.
It's the exact same kind of evolution.
But I do have to demand a reality check on the hype here.
Okay, let's hear it.
I read in the report that sulfide-based solid electrolytes can react with air to make toxic gas. And the oxide versions need to be baked at 1,000 degrees.
Yes.
Isn't manufacturing these things on a global scale an absolute nightmare right now?
This raises an important question about manufacturing scale.
Yeah.
You were totally right to be skeptical. The hurdles are monumental. One of the biggest challenges is interface resistance.
Wait, what does interface resistance actually do inside the battery?
Think about pouring a liquid into a container. It naturally flows and perfectly coats every microscopic crevice, creating continuous contact for the ions.
Makes sense.
But a solid material is rigid. If there is even a microscopic atomic level gap between the solid electrolyte and the electrode, the ions can't jump across. That creates resistance.
Oh, so you have to compress the layers together so perfectly that there are zero air pockets.
Exactly. And at the same time, you have to formulate the solid material to suppress dendrite growth.
Dendrites.
They are tiny needle-like metallic structures that naturally grow inside batteries over thousands of cycles.
Oh,
In liquid batteries, they can pierce the separator and cause a short circuit.
yikes.
So the solid electrolyte has to be physically tough enough to block those needles from growing.
That sounds incredibly hard to mass produce. So, what is the actual timeline for consumers? The report mentioned China is releasing a standard in July 2026.
Right. We are currently in what they call Phase 1, which uses semi-solid batteries. They still contain a little bit of liquid to help with that interface resistance.
The transitional phase.
Exactly. Moving to Phase 2 between 2026 and 2027, we'll see initial production of true solid-state cells.
But probably just in luxury cars, right?
Yes, very low volume. True mass production Phase 3 is really a 2030 and beyond reality.
Got
So it's a phased evolution.
Okay, so don't hold your breath for a cheap solid-state EV tomorrow.
Exactly.
Well, bringing it all together for you, the listener, the EV transition isn't failing, it's maturing.
It has moved past the honeymoon phase of early adopters.
Right, into the gritty logistical realities of grid upgrades, a booming secondary market, and deep tech battery science. So what does this all mean for you?
It means the landscape is actively shifting to accommodate you.
Yeah, whether you're hunting for a $25,000 used EV right now or holding out for a 1,000-kilometer solid-state battery in 2030.
And, building on Uber's robotaxi investments, it leaves us with one final kind of wild idea to mull over.
Oh, what's that?
If autonomous vehicles eventually dominate the roads and they drive themselves to high-speed charging depots while we sleep,
Okay.
will future generations even need to know how to plug a car in?
Oh, wow.
Perhaps charging anxiety is just a temporary historical quirk of the 2020s that our kids will never actually experience.
They'll just look back and laugh at us standing in the rain with a heavy cable.
Exactly.
That is an amazing thought to end on. To everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the 2026 EV landscape. Keep exploring, and we will catch you next time.